Hey guys, tonight we slip softly through the shimmering blue gates of Babylon. The very gates of Ishtar themselves, tiled with lions and dragons that glow in the torchlight. You stand beneath them, and the city hums with a life that has pulsed for thousands of years. The smell of bitumen, wine, and roasting grain clings to the air, and the night feels heavy with both expectation and secrets. You can almost hear the shuffle of sandals and the creak of carts, but also something else, something hushed, whispered, not meant for the light of day. You probably wouldn't survive long in this world of bargains and rituals, but you don't need to. Tonight you only need to listen. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me in the comments. Where are you listening from, and what time is it right now? I'll dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step beneath the archway, its bricks glazed a deep lapis that catches the firelight in dazzling patterns. This is Babylon at night, a place where merchants call out by day, but when darkness falls, the murmurs shift. Some speak of gods and offerings, others of wine and music, and some of rituals you're not sure you believe. Historians still argue whether the so-called sacred prostitution of Babylon was literal, symbolic, or somewhere in between. What's certain is that ancient writers, from Herodotus to later chroniclers, described women coming to the temple of Ishtar to give themselves to strangers as an act of devotion. Whether those accounts were truth, exaggeration, or foreign misunderstanding remains unresolved. Still, in the hush of this imagined night, you can see how the story lingers. Women wrapped in linen veils walk slowly past you, carrying baskets of dates and incense. Men press coins of silver into their palms, not roughly, but as though fulfilling a sacred duty. The temple steps rise ahead, and you sense that to cross them is to leave the realm of market chatter and enter something more charged, half divine, half carnal. Factual note you might not expect. The Temple of Ishtar was not just a place of worship, but also a hub of economy and culture. Offerings flowed in, contracts were sealed, debts recorded. Alongside prayers to the goddess of love and war, there was bookkeeping. Babylonian priests were as much administrators as they were spiritual guides. And yet woven into those records are whispers of rituals that blurred the line between devotion and desire. One fringe detail told in later traditions is that every woman at least once in her life was expected to sit in the temple precinct and accept a stranger S-coin in Ishtar's name. Some accounts claim it was voluntary, others that it was mandatory. Historians still debate fiercely. Was this an actual institution, or a Greek fantasy about Mesopotamian customs? You, wandering here under the oil lamps, feel the tension in the very air between myth and truth, between curiosity and discomfort. The torchlight throws long shadows across the stones, and the voices around you grow quieter. You notice a woman pause at the gate, her veil drawn low, her hands clasped tight. She whispers something you cannot hear, then steps forward, vanishing into the temple courtyard. Behind her another follows, and then another, as if the night itself has become a procession. The people of Babylon watch but do not judge, for this is life here. Tangled, complicated, sacred, profane. You trail behind, feeling the hum of the city fade into the heartbeat of ritual. The gates close softly, though you can still glimpse the lions roaring from their tiles. Guardians of a secret you are only beginning to uncover. The night in Babylon is not merely darkness, it is a theater of devotion, desire, and the strange bargains struck between gods and mortals. You follow the procession deeper into the heart of Babylon, and the night unfolds like a scroll of scents and sounds. The streets are alive, though the stars overhead are dimmed by smoke from countless oil lamps. Perfume drifts from open stalls, frankincense, myrrh, and cedar mingling with the harsher smell of roasting meat and the sweet tang of wine. Your senses swim, and you realize why travelers once called Babylon not just a city, but an experience. Fact tells us that Babylon was a hub of trade, its markets overflowing with goods brought from as far as India, Arabia, and Anatolia. Merchants shouted by day, but at night their wares spoke in subtler ways. Jars of unguents, glistening in lamplight, amphorae of wine, sweating with dew. And among these offerings veiled figures moved, less like buyers and more like shadows, fringe detail preserved in later tales. Some women preparing for temple service were anointed with perfumed oils in the marketplace itself, their scent meant to announce devotion before they even reached the ziggurat. Historians still argue whether this was a ritual practice or a flourish invented by storytellers. But here, under the lamps, you can almost smell the intention lingering in the air. The crowd thickens, and you watch coins change hands in gestures so swift they seem rehearsed. A man offers figs, another pours diluted wine into small clay cups, and yet the true exchange is not food or drink, it is expectation. Each glance, each whispered bargain, leads inevitably toward the temple precinct. You feel how the city itself conspires to funnel desire into devotion, commerce into ceremony. A young girl passes you, her veil tugged low, a small vial of oil clutched in her palm. Her pace is steady, but her knuckles whiten with pressure. Behind her, musicians strike a quiet rhythm, lutes and drums soften to a heartbeat. The perfume grows thicker, cloying almost, and yet strangely calming. Odd. You drift with it, as though the streets themselves are breathing you into the temple's embrace. The streets narrow as you approach the precinct of the temple, and the noise of the market fades into a hush. Stone walls rise, catching the moonlight, and in the dimness you hear it whispers, not the shouts of traders, not the laughter of drinkers, but soft, urgent voices. Whispers of the temple. Everyone in Babylon knows of the goddess Ishtar, patron of love, war, and fertility. Her temples dominate the skyline, and her rituals shape the rhythms of life. One fact that scholars often note: fertility rites were integral to Mesopotamian religion. Fields, families, and empires depended on the favor of the gods, and rituals of the body were seen as mirrors of rituals of the earth. If crops needed coaxing to grow, so did lineage and legacy. Yet here, in the half-light, the stories carry a darker tone. Some say every woman must, at least once in her life, sit in the temple precinct, veiled and waiting, until a stranger offers silver. Others insist it was only a few priestesses chosen for sacred service. Historians still argue whether these accounts were factual practices or misinterpretations by outsiders like Herodotus. You feel the tension of uncertainty, as though the city itself cannot decide what is truth and what is rumor. A fringed tale speaks of temple corridors where footsteps echoed on polished brick, and whispers drifted through like incense smoke. Women knelt before statues, lips moving in prayer, before rising to meet the gaze of men who entered not as lovers, but as supplicants. The exchange was said to honor Ishtar, transforming desire into devotion. Whether literal or symbolic, the idea persists. In Babylon, the line between sacred and sensual was as thin as the veil covering a woman's face. You pause beneath a carved relief, lions pacing across the stone. A woman beside you adjusts her veil, her eyes darting toward the ziggurat looming above. You sense her heartbeat in the quickness of her breath, though she stands still. Around you, men murmur to one another, clutching coins. The whispers gather not only in speech but in the unspoken. The shuffle of sandals, the clink of silver, the soft rustle of linen. The temple is near, and its secrets breathe in every shadow. You stand at the threshold of the temple court, and before you, the women are no longer shadows, but figures fully formed in lamplight. They are called the daughters of Ishtar, sacred courtesans, though the title carries more weight than any single word can hold. Their veils are thin, their jewelry bright, their posture both proud and hesitant. You sense a paradox. They are honored as servants of the goddess, yet whispered about as women of the night. One historical fact is certain: temples in Mesopotamia often housed women dedicated to ritual service. Some were musicians, some were caretakers, and some bore roles that blurred into intimacy. In cuneiform records, these women are sometimes named as Nadru or Kadista, terms that scholars still puzzle over. Were they priestesses, concubines, or something entirely different? The ambiguity is part of their power, for no single label defines their place in Babylonian society. Curious detail: some accounts claim these women were not permitted to marry in the traditional sense. Instead, they lived in cloistered quarters near the temple, devoted entirely to service. To outsiders, their appearance and rituals seemed provocative. Yet within Babylon, their presence was layered, symbolic, economic, spiritual. Historians still argue whether their roles included acts of physical union with worshippers, or whether that was the projection of foreign imagination. You watch as one woman steps forward, her anklets ringing softly. She offers a bowl of dates at the temple threshold, then lifts her veil just enough to reveal eyes rimmed in kohl. Around her, men bow their heads not in lust, but in awe. The ritual is public and private at once, a performance with meanings you cannot fully untangle. The courtesans move with a rhythm that feels rehearsed, though no song plays. Their veils flutter like moth wings in the lamplight, and the scent of cedar and myrrh clings to their skin. Some smile faintly, others carry the weight of silence. You realize each carries her own secret. A story not written in tablets, but in glances, in footsteps, in the way her hand lingers on the statue's base. Here in the temple, these women embody the city's contradictions. They are mothers of prosperity, protectors of crops, companions of kings, and yet, in whispers, they are reduced to a single role. You, standing in the glow of torches, feel the pull of mystery, sacred courtesans, at once elevated and diminished. Keepers of a truth that may never be fully known. The torches flicker as the night deepens, and at the threshold of the temple a ritual begins that is both ordinary and extraordinary. Men step forward with small offerings, coins of silver, loaves of bread, jars of oil. These gifts are placed beneath the gaze of the goddess, or more precisely, at the feet of her priestesses. You lean in closer, hearing the clink of metal against stone, a sound that feels heavier than its weight. One historical fact stands out. Silver was the backbone of Babylon's economy. It was used in trade, in wages, and in temple offerings. To give silver was not merely to pay, it was to participate in the sacred cycle of exchange. In the rituals of Ishtar, silver could symbolize devotion, a tangible bridge between desire and divinity. Yet a fringe account insists that sometimes the offering was symbolic rather than transactional. A single coin placed in the lap of a veiled woman was enough, no matter its value. The act itself was the prayer. Historians still argue whether this practice was widespread or whether it emerged from the imagination of Greek storytellers who visited Mesopotamia. You, standing in the lamplight, feel the ambiguity pressing on your chest. Was it commerce or was it ceremony? Perhaps both. The line of men grows, each one lowering his eyes as he extends his hand. Some mutter prayers, others remain silent. The courtesans accept the offerings with practiced grace, placing them in bowls at the temple steps. A few smile faintly, though the weight of expectation is heavy in their posture. You notice one man tremble as he presses a loaf of bread forward, his lips dry as he whispers a name, perhaps his wife, perhaps his child, perhaps the goddess herself. No. You drift among them, your presence unseen, and the atmosphere feels like a marketplace draped in holiness. There is no bargaining here, no haggling. Instead, there is ritual precision. The bread is measured, the silver weighed, the oil poured carefully. The exchange is quiet but immense, every gesture echoing in the torchlight as though recorded in stone. Above, the statue of Ishtar looms, her eyes catching the flame. The offerings pile at her feet, and you sense that each coin is more than metal, each loaf more than grain. They are confessions, hopes, bargains, whispered into the night. And as the last man steps back into the shadows, the courtyard still hums, as though the silver itself carries the heartbeat of Babylon. The offerings rest at the temple steps, but your eyes are drawn upward toward the vast shadow of the ziggurat. Its tiers rise layer upon layer, a mountain of brick built by human hands. And at night it looms like a ladder reaching into darkness. The flicker of torches climbs its sides, but the summit is lost in shadow, a crown hidden from your view. One historical fact. Ziggurats were the architectural heart of Mesopotamian cities. They were not simply temples, but cosmic bridges, meant to connect earth with heaven. The great ziggurat of Babylon, Etemenanke, was said to be the foundation of heaven and earth, a place where gods might descend and mortals might ascend. To climb its steps was to step closer to the divine, even if your purpose was draped in secrecy. A fringe account whispers that some rituals took place not only in the courtyards, but high upon the terraces. There, in the cool night wind, vows were exchanged, coins placed, and bodies pressed against cold brick as offerings were transformed into flesh and prayer. Historians still argue whether these descriptions were reality or allegory, metaphors misunderstood by outsiders. Yet standing here, you can almost hear the rustle of linen against stone. You step closer, and the shadow of the ziggurat falls across you like a cloak. Figures ascend slowly, veiled women guided by torchlight, their anklets chiming faintly. Men follow, heads bowed, clutching vessels of wine or handfuls of silver. Each step seems heavier than the last, as though gravity itself deepens under the gaze of the goddess. You sense the solemnity. This is not lust parading as devotion, but devotion cloaked in the forms of the body. The bricks beneath your fingers are warm from the day's sun, yet they seem to pulse with secrets. You imagine how many feet have passed this way, how many prayers have been carried upward. The ziggurat holds them all, layer upon layer, whispers pressed into clay like cuneiform. And as you look upward into the shadows, you feel that the mysteries of Babylon are not confined to the temple floor, they ascend into the night sky. Born on stone and silence, at the mid-terraces of the ziggurat, where the night wind cools the sweat on your skin, a hush falls. The procession halts, and what unfolds is neither loud nor flamboyant. It is quiet, almost tender, the ritual kiss. One fact about Mesopotamian devotion: gestures carried meaning as potent as words. Bowing, clasping hands, touching lips to the ground, or to a statuette, were ways to bind mortal to divine. In some records, the kiss was a mark of loyalty, pressed to the feet of kings or to the sacred emblems of gods. To kiss was not to show affection in the modern sense, but to seal presence in the realm of the holy. Yet a fringe tale whispers that in the temples of Ishtar, kisses were sometimes exchanged not with stone idols, but with living priestesses. A worshipper, after offering silver, would be guided to lift the veil of a woman of the temple and press lips. Lightly to her gesture, said to transfer devotion from mortal flesh to goddess spirit. Historians still argue whether this was truth, metaphor, or scandalous exaggeration by foreign visitors. You, standing here, feel the tension between devotion and desire, concentrated in that simple meeting of lips. The courtesans lift their veils slowly. Each movement is deliberate, like the unfurling of a banner. Their faces emerge in the glow of the torches, eyes outlined in black coal, lips stained with wine or berry. One man bows, trembling, as he bends forward. Their lips meet not with passion, but with a gravity that presses the air around them. It is solemn, ceremonial, yet you cannot deny the human heartbeat pulsing beneath. Around you, the others wait in silence. No laughter, no whispers. Only the sound of anklets ringing faintly and the wind moving along the terrace. The kiss becomes less an act of intimacy and more an echo of eternity, repeated in quiet devotion. Still, you sense how easily lines blur, how the body insists on being present, even in rituals meant to transcend it. You step back, and the scene unfolds like a mural come to life, rows of figures veiled and unveiled. Lips brushing lips, an offering carried not just in silver but in breath. Ritual kiss lingers, a reminder that in Babylon, the divine was never far from the human, and the human never far from the divine. The ritual subsides, and the terrace falls into silence, save for the low hum of wind across stone. You linger, your mind turning from the flicker of torches to the echoes of centuries. For even as you watch, you realize that the truth of what you see is not agreed upon. It is here, at the edge of the ziggurat, that the voices of scholars rise, debating across time like ghosts. One fact anchors the discussion. Ancient Mesopotamia left behind thousands of clay tablets, inscribed with cuneiform. These tablets record laws, hymns, contracts, and prayers. But nowhere do they explicitly command the so-called temple prostitution described by later Greek writers. Instead, what we have are fragments. Titles of women associated with temples. Hints of rituals tied to fertility, in descriptions written centuries later by outsiders. A fringe interpretation suggests that the Greeks misunderstood the symbolism of Babylonian rites. To sit in the temple courtyard may not have meant physical union with strangers, but a posture of waiting, a symbolic marriage to the goddess. Historians still argue whether Herodotus was reporting fact, exaggerating tales he heard, or crafting a morality story to astonish his audience back home. The debate is unresolved, and perhaps that is why the whispers still haunt these stones. You imagine the scholars leaning in, some insisting the rituals were literal, others shaking their heads, calling it myth layered upon myth. They cite tablets, argue over translations, and gesture toward the silence in the archaeological record. And yet, outside these debates, the story lives on, retold for centuries, lingering like incense long after the fire has died. The women around you do not answer the scholars. Their veils rustle, their anklets ring. Their presence is both too immediate and too elusive for certainty. You feel how history resists being pinned down, how it slips between fact and fable. In Babylon, the truth may always be half stone, half shadow. The debates fade like echoes on the wind, and what rises in their place is music. Soft at first, barely there, a pluck of strings, a muted beat of hand on drum. You follow the sound deeper into the temple courtyard, and there in the half-light, you see it? A lute cradled in the hands of a veiled woman. Her fingers dance lightly, coaxing notes that shimmer like silver across the stone. One historical fact about Mesopotamian temples: music and dance were central to worship. Hymns were sung to honor the gods, instruments played to mark rituals, and musicians were part of temple households. The oldest written music in the world, discovered on cuneiform tablets, comes from this very region, evidence that melody and devotion were inseparable. But here in Babylon's night, the music carries another layer. A fringe tale claims that courtesans trained not only in ritual devotion, but also in the arts of song and dance. Their music, some say, softened the hearts of worshippers, blurring the line between prayer and pleasure. Historians still argue whether these women were performers, priestesses, or both. What you hear, though, feels like more than entertainment. It is an invitation into mystery. The lute plays, joined by the faint rattle of a sistrum, and soon the air itself vibrates with rhythm. Courtesans move slowly, their steps measured, veils flowing like banners in the wind. Men watch, transfixed, their offerings forgotten for a moment as the music claims them. You notice how carefully choreographed it feels, yet at the same time, how spontaneous, how alive. A woman tilts her head back, singing softly, her voice a thread of silk weaving through the night. The words are old, older than the city itself, and though you cannot understand them, you sense their weight. They are a hymn to Ishtar, but also a lullaby, but also something Mara song that reaches into both devotion and desire. You lean against the warm brick, letting the sound wash over you. The hidden lute does not roar, does not command. It whispers, it soothes, it blurs. And you realize, in Babylon, music was the most powerful offering of all. The music fades into a hum that clings to the stones, and then the crowd parts. You notice a ripple of silence, as though the night itself inhales. From the shadow of the ziggurat stair, a figure steps forward, not a courtesan, not a priestess, but a woman draped in silks, finer than any you have seen tonight. Jewels catch the lamplight, and a crown of delicate gold rests on her brow, the queen's presence. One fact you may not know: in Mesopotamian ritual life, royal women often played significant roles. Queens served as high priestesses in certain cults, especially those of Ishtar and Sin. Their bodies were symbols of the state, their participation in ritual believed to secure the favor of the gods for the entire empire. A queen's presence in temple ceremonies was not mere ornament, it was power embodied. A fringe tradition whispers that some queens, at least in legend, partook in fertility rites themselves, offering symbolic gestures of union in the name of the goddess. Some accounts claim they presided over sacred marriages, the hieros gamos, enacting the union of king and goddess through ritualized intimacy. Historians still argue whether these stories reflect actual events, symbolic theater, or the embroidery of myth onto politics. You, standing here, sense both reverence and scandal woven into the air. The queen moves with measured grace, her veil trailing like smoke. Men bow deeply, women avert their eyes, and yet all look sideways, stealing glimpses. She places her hand on the statue's base, fingers trembling just enough to betray humanity beneath the finery. The courtesans stand back, allowing her space. For in this moment, she is more than noble Shay. is the axis where earth and heaven touch. You watch as she turns her head slightly, meeting the gaze of a priest. The silence deepens, filled with the weight of possibility. The music resumes, but softer now, as though accompanying her every step. And you feel the paradox. A queen elevated above all, yet bound by the same rituals of body and secrecy. The queen's presence is at once a blessing and a question, echoing in the hush of Babylon's night. The queen's figure dissolves into shadow as she retreats, and once again the city's pulse leads you onward. Past the torches and the terraces, you find yourself drifting toward the edge of the temple precinct, where the air grows cooler. There beyond the walls, the Euphrates flows. Its waters catch the faint shimmer of starlight, moving slow, wide, and silent. The river is a witness, though it never speaks. One fact about Babylon: the Euphrates was its lifeline. It brought trade, fertile soil, and the power to sustain one of the world's greatest cities. Rituals often tied directly to water ablutions, libations, and symbolic crossings from one bank to another. To the Babylonians, rivers were not just resources. They were living boundaries between sacred and profane, known and unknown. But here, in the dark, the river seems to hold more than irrigation or commerce. A fringe tale murmurs that some meetings between courtesans and supplicants occurred not in the temple itself, but by the river's edge. There, beneath reeds and moonlight, silver changed hands, vows were whispered, and prayers drifted on the current. Historians still argue whether such accounts reflect reality or romanticize tales carried by travelers. You, listening to the hush of water, can almost hear the voices caught between waves. The courtesans move like shadows here too, their veils trailing along the riverbank, their reflections quivering in the ripples. Men follow, some hesitant, others eager, but all subdued by the vast stillness of the Euphrates. The river absorbs their secrets, carrying them downstream to places unseen. You crouch at the edge, dipping your hand into the cool flow. It slides past, eternal, indifferent, yet somehow intimate. How many confessions, how many whispered bargains have these waters carried away? The stones of the temple may guard their echoes, but the river swallows everything sin's hopes, the dark truths of Babylon. The river hums on, swallowing its secrets. But Babylon always finds new ways to hide what it cannot shout aloud. You leave the bank behind and return to the temple quarter, where a quieter ritual unfolds. It's not of silver, nor of song, but of clay and scent. Perfumed letters. One fact that grounds this tale: Babylonians wrote on clay tablets, using cuneiform pressed with reed styluses. Contracts, prayers, even recipes have survived for millennia, hardened by fire or sun. Some tablets preserve intimate details, lists of gifts given to lovers, petitions for fertility, and even fragments of love poetry. The words of affection are dry in form, but their emotion lingers, surprisingly tender across the ages. A fringe tradition suggests that some of these tablets were more than contracts. Lovers, forbidden by law or ritual, wrote their desires into clay and then burned incense over them, letting perfume cling to the surface. The tablets were then hidden under bricks, tucked into walls, or buried near courtyards. Historians still argue whether such practices truly happened, or whether they are embroidered myths born from scattered finds. You, brushing your hand along the warm temple stones, can almost believe in those hidden missives. You picture it: a woman, her veil drawn low, pressing stylus to clay by lamplight. Her words are brief, clipped by necessity, by fear of discovery. She sprinkles oil of cedar or rose across the damp clay, then sets it aside to dry. Later, she hides it beneath the very bricks you now lean on, hoping her secret survives in silence. Perhaps the intended lover finds it, perhaps no one ever does. Still, the gesture carries weight, a private ritual layered within the public face of Babylonian devotion. The scent of frankincense drifts past you now, mixing with the faint musk of baked clay. You imagine the temple walls thick with whispers, each brick guarding not just prayers but confessions. Perfumed letters, unseen but enduring, give voice to the dark secrets that the night itself refuses to carry aloud. The temple walls hold their secrets, perfumed letters hidden beneath bricks, but not all whispers can be confined to clay. Some spill into life, into flesh, into the tremor of hands that reach for one another in the dark. Tonight, you sense one such story, the forbidden lovers. That pact to ground us, Babylonian society, like many ancient cultures, was built on contracts. Marriage was a legal bond, property was exchanged, and lineage was carefully guarded. Fidelity, at least for women, was expected as part of the social fabric. But where there are laws, there are always cracks. The tablets preserve cases of adultery tried before judges, punishments laid out with cold precision. Yet behind every ruling, there must have been countless secret encounters never recorded. A fringed tale tells of a high official who fell in love with a woman of the temple, and a Drew bound to celibacy. By day she was cloistered in service, her hair shorn, her movements restricted. By night, so the story goes, he crept to the temple walls, where she lowered a rope woven of linen strips. Their meetings were brief, stolen beneath the gaze of the goddess they both served. Historians still argue whether such stories reflect real acts of defiance or later inventions meant to dramatize the lives of cloistered women. You imagine the moment. The man standing in the shadow of the ziggurat, heart pounding, while above him a veil slips back and a hand extends. Fingers meet in the night, rough calluses, brushing soft skin. No hymns are sung, no offerings exchanged, only the raw, trembling risk of human desire. The lover's secret cannot last. The temple is full of eyes, and Babylon is a city of whispers. Perhaps they are discovered, perhaps not. Perhaps their story ends in punishment, perhaps in silence. What matters is that it existed, that even in a world ruled by law and ritual, hearts still strayed, still sought warmth in forbidden arms. As you stand among the stones, you feel their breath in the night air, the ghost of a touch long vanished. The forbidden lovers linger, unseen yet unforgettable, reminding you that Babylon's greatest secrets were not always carved in clay, but lived in the fragile space between devotion and desire. The lovers' whispers fade into memory, but their shadows remain etched on the temple stones. As you wander deeper into the night, a larger question begins to stir, one that haunted Babylon as much as it haunts you now. What is sin, and what is salvation? A fact preserved in law codes, Babylon was strict in its sense of justice. The Code of Hammurabi, centuries old even in the city's golden age, laid out punishments for adultery, theft, and sacrilege. Society demanded order, and yet, at the very same time, the goddess Ishtar embodied both love and war, both creation and destruction. To serve her often meant to blur the line between what was permitted and what was condemned. A fringe belief suggests that acts considered sinful in the marketplace could be seen as sacred within the temple. A woman's body, outside these walls, might be judged. Inside, it might be revered as the vessel of divine blessing. Historians still argue whether such reversals of morality were truly practiced, or whether they are exaggerations by storytellers, eager to frame Babylon as decadent. But here, under the torchlight, you sense the paradox. Sin and salvation could be the same gesture, interpreted differently by the place where it occurred. You see it in the faces of the worshippers. Man bows low, offering silver with trembling hands, perhaps to atone for guilt that gnaws at him. Another leans forward to kiss the veil of a courtesan, hoping not just for favor but for forgiveness. The ritual becomes both confession and absolution, both indulgence and purification. The courtesans themselves carry this dual weight. They're spoken of in reverence and in rumor, sanctified and shamed at once. Their bodies are both sacred script and social scandal, their touch both curse and cure. And you, watching them move through the torchlight, feel the uneasy truth. Babylon did not separate sin from salvation. It bound them together, as inseparable as shadow from flame. The wind stirs, and you imagine the scholars of the future shaking their heads, debating endlessly, never reaching certainty. But the people here do not need certainty. They need hope. They need forgiveness. They need the solace of rituals that tell them the gods are listening, even if those rituals dwell in the delicate, dangerous realm of desire. The torches are guttering now, their flames bending low in the dawn breeze. The temple stands quiet, and the ziggurat rises in silhouette against a paling sky. You wander through the empty courtyard, the night's rituals still echoing in your mind. Coins pressed into palms, veils lifted, lips meeting. Songs carried on the hidden lutal of it lingers in the hush of early morning. One fact closes the circle. Babylon eventually fell, its temples toppled, its rituals erased or absorbed into the sands of history. The great ziggurat was reduced to ruin, the courtyards buried, the voices silenced, and in fragments tablets of clay, broken statues, lines written by foreign travelers, the memory survives. Babylon may be dust, but its whispers still reach across the centuries. A fringe notion suggests that even in ruin, the stones themselves hold memory. Some archaeologists have spoken of strange impressions, grooves worn in patterns that could be ritual traces. Historians still argue whether these marks are accidents of time or evidence of long-forgotten practices. You press your hand against the stone, and though it is cold, you feel the pulse of thousands who came before. The city around you stirs awake. Merchants ready their stalls, children chase each other through narrow alleys, and the river gleams like a ribbon of bronze. Life goes on, ordinary and extraordinary at once. But you know what the stones remember? Beneath the surface, beneath the records, Babylon holds its dark secrets still. And now, as the first light softens the sharp edges of stone, you can let go of Babylon. The gates close gently behind you, and the city fades into dream. The whispers of the courtesans, the hush of the river, the gleam of silver offerings, all of it drifts away like smoke curling into the morning air. Your breathing slows. The night's journey has been long, winding through rituals half remembered, half imagined, a tapestry woven from history and myth.
Oh.
You don't need to know where fact ended and story began. What matters is the rhythm, the calm, the gentle hum of a past that no longer demands anything from you. The stones of Babylon are quiet now. They do not ask for silver. They do not carry judgment. They only rest, and in their stillness, they invite you to rest too. Imagine yourself lying down beside them, the coolness of clay beneath you, the wide sky above. You are safe here, outside of time, outside of duty. Let the images fade slowly, veils fluttering in torchlight, music brushing the air, water gliding endlessly along the Euphrates. Let them soften into shapes that no longer demand focus, only ease. The night is no longer filled with secrets. It is filled with calm. And as your eyes grow heavy, remember that the stories of Babylon, like dreams, do not need endings, they only need silence. So close your eyes, breathe deep, and allow yourself to drift into the stillness that waits, as patient and eternal as stone.